fighting for such a long time. And I feel a lot of these things you're fighting about are really solvable matters. Why don't you just just talk through things? This whole fighting, the background of that was, my dad was a very religious man in the Catholic Church. So it was so interesting. On Saturday nights, he'll be brought home by his friends because he couldn't walk on his own because he's drunk. And on Sunday afternoon, when we go to church together, he's reading announcements at the pulpit. That was very confusing for me. I was used to being beaten. My dad would beat you with his soul. Like, all the problems he's gone through in his life come to that one moment, and he beats you up like it's do or die. Do you know these things, you watch them in movies, like somebody burning you and they're looking at you? That's exactly what happened. I remember that he was looking at me and he was putting the flame here on my hand because of a book that I supposedly stole. I changed completely. I started withdrawing because now home stopped feeling like home. It even stopped feeling like school. It became a war zone. You know, I'm here with people I can't trust anymore. Mom couldn't protect me. Dad is being abusive. My uncle is just there. Everybody is watching me being abused and I can't tell anybody. So I just became quiet. We rely on women on emotional labor because we were separated from our emotions from a young age. It was beaten out of us. Don't cry, be hard, nini. So you become an adult and all of a sudden you're in a relationship and this woman expects you to show your emotions. You don't know how to show your emotions. You don't know how to open up. I deserved a healthy home. I deserved healthy parents. I deserved love. And since I couldn't get those things as a child, I had to learn how to give them to myself. It meant I had to stop my brain from simulating the violence I was taught, the violence I was conditioned to, and create a new brain for myself. My mom and dad had been fighting, the probably 2000th fight they were having. And I was really tired of this situation at home. Now, being a firstborn in the house, I think I was just forced to grow up so quick. Sometimes it felt like I was actually parenting my own parents. And this time, I took it upon myself to call my parents for a meeting, which is very suicidal here. I was like, hey, Nyose, me, I'm tired. I'm tired of this chaos. I'm tired of the fights. I just want a peaceful home. And I'm now an adult. I want a peaceful life. So I called my mom, Kando. My mom and I talk. So we had a meeting. She listened to me. I listened to her. And then came dad. With dad, it was a risk because we weren't close and I wasn't sure what to expect. Yeah. So I remember he came home, he accepted my call for a meeting, and then we sat on the dining table. And then I was like, I really feel you guys have been fighting for such a long time. And I feel a lot of these things you're fighting about are really solvable matters. Why don't you just just talk through things? This whole fighting, the background of that was he had floored all of mom's clothes in their bedroom. Everything, her clothes, her shoes, after the fight they had. And that wasn't even new in my house. And so I just couldn't imagine me living the rest of my life seeing my parents in that state. Yeah, so in fact, there's a thing that happened between my dad's meeting and I that forced me to now really go back for my own good. Yeah. So I remember, after that whole conversation with Dad, he told me a statement that changed my life. He said, I don't come to you with my problems because you think I'm weak. Okay? So, in my mind, I'm like, this dude actually thinks I view him as a perfect person just because he never comes to me with his problems. And on the other side, I'm thinking, how much pain must he have gone through or been going through for him to feel he can't express himself to me? His child, his firstborn child. Yeah. And I had been asking so many questions about Dad because he seemed like a very strange person to me. The violence we grew up in was intensely insane. Even as I started going back, was this thing that happened to me when I was 10 years old. I was in class 6. This is 1998. And we lived in Huruma Estate in a single room, actually, with some other small thing for a kitchen over there. My mom, my dad, my uncle and the house help, and myself. And I mean, that house was so small, I used to shikanisha these 2 small chairs, yeah, to sleep on. Yeah. So on this particular day, both my parents are teachers. So on this particular day, my dad came back home and he started looking for some book. Yeah. And he didn't tell anybody what book he was looking for. So when, trying to figure out where it was, he couldn't find it, he said, you guys, have you seen this in this book? It was a novel by Bill Cosby, and those days Bill Cosby was huge. So none of us had seen this book. I had seen the cover before. As a class 6 student, Bodmas was enough for me. Novels, I wasn't such a fan of books anyway, because in fact, home felt like another school. And in his frantic search for this novel, in a single room, when something is not in the 4 corners of that house, it is not there. So I remember him asking me, ama ni wewe umechukua hiyo kitabu? And then he asked me, in this house, can your mother steal a book? Can the house help steal a book? Can your uncle steal a book? Si wewe ndo unaenda shule kwa hii nyumba. You're the one who's going to school in this house. Generally, I was a fairly cheeky boy, but not evil. Stealing a book felt like a bank heist, because where was I taking a novel? It was too big for me. So that evening, my dad, as if he had planned all this, walked out and he came back with this hard telephone copper wire. Yeah? The ones we see when we are traveling, these ones, the hard, tough copper wire. And he starts beating me up with it. And I was used to being beaten. My dad would beat you with his soul. Like all the problems he's gone through in his life come to that one moment. And he beats you up like it's do or die. It's almost like one of you has to die and he's the one who's stronger, so you don't have much luck. But this day was different because he stripped me of my clothes. Yeah. And he would lash at my back with this copper. I was 10, very tiny body. I was 10 years old. And in 15 minutes, my body was frailing and frailing and frailing because I wasn't sure how much this man was willing to go. Now, this book he was looking for belonged to a student he used to tutor. So of course it was, a very important book to him. And the fact that he couldn't find it, definitely the stakes were high. And I was almost the easiest target for his accusation at that moment in time. I was bleeding profusely, I was sweating, I was screaming. My mom was watching there helplessly. My uncle couldn't do anything. My dad, you wouldn't tell him anything. And then I remember my little child intelligence telling me, we are not so sure about this guy tonight. So just lie this once, You lie other times for things you did, but today, just lie, you didn't do this thing. But you actually, just say you did it. So I said I took the book. I can't remember where I said I took the book. And then I remember, his bloodshot eyes, so angry, he looked at me and he said, I'll do something to you that you'll never forget. Hey. He stepped outside as if he'd planned it. Came back, I was on the floor, that those last minutes cries. He came back with a sisal rope this time. I'm naked, I'm on the floor, I'm crying. And he tied my hands. And then he walked into the kitchen and came back with the paraffin jerrycan, the ones, 5-liter paraffin jerrycan, and a matchbox, all right? And what I remember is he poured a bit of the paraffin on the jerrycan lid and smeared a bit of it here on my upper palm and lit the matchstick. And he put that flame here. That's why I actually have a mark. And I think my brain blocked the pain of that moment because to date I can't remember how it felt. What I know is I couldn't walk for 2 weeks. That I remember. I couldn't walk for 2 weeks. My hand was swollen. I remember my mom the following day trying to bandage my hand. My body was really weak. But what happened that evening, I felt like something tore inside me that I didn't have a name for. Yeah. And that was the beginning of my trauma, for real, because I changed completely. I started withdrawing because now home stopped feeling like home. It even stopped feeling like school. It became a war zone. I'm here with people I can't trust anymore. Mom couldn't protect me. Dad is being abusive. My uncle is just there. Everybody's watching me being abused and I can't tell anybody. So I just became quiet, And that was it. My life just changed completely. Do you know these things, you watch them in movies, like somebody burning you and they're looking at you? That's exactly what happened. I remember that. He was looking at me and he was putting the flame here on my hand because of a book that I supposedly stole. Now, this was me 10 years. So 6 years later, now the traumas had started showing up on my body. I was in Form 2. My depression is starting to show up. None of us knew this was depression. What would happen is, I was taken to Form 1 in a school very far away from home, so I lost my sense of belonging. I felt like nobody was understanding or talking to me at home. So I got to school, I stopped reading. I couldn't read at all. I couldn't socialize. In fact, the only time I was active was when I was in the football pitch because I was free to play, and football was such an important thing to me to express myself. But in that school, I stopped bathing. In fact, I remember I had this long streak of 9 days without bathing. Just me going to class, going to the pitch, coming back, najipanguza, towel, valon, supper, class. That was my life. And then I stopped going to class. Now I was hanging out in the bathrooms by myself, and then I started stealing things because I wasn't doing my own laundry. I would steal my friends' clothes, and then I'd steal money, and then I was busted and expelled. In fact, even without a letter. So in this period of expulsion, I come back home. And of course, my dad is angry, my mom is angry, everybody's angry at me because I did this in school and I've been expelled. I'm very ungrateful. I'm being given an education and I'm wasting it away. What do I want? They always ask you, unataka nini? Tumekupatia kila kitu. And all this time, in my small heart, I'm just like, I wish I lived in a home I could talk. Because even if I would answer your question, you'd still beat me. Yeah. So 6 years after the incident of my hand, in the period I was home from expulsion, now I started running away from home. Yeah. And the first time I ran away, we stayed in a place called Mlolongo. And I was born in Kitengela. Mlolongo and Kitengela is, by those days, it was like 20 shillings fare. So that's like a 10-minute, 15-minute ride. So the first time I ran away from home, I went to the childhood place I was born in, yeah, to look for those people if I could find them. I needed to be around people who I knew would get me. And in my child's brain, it was that sense of belonging, and that the place I was born would give me that. So I walked up to there because I didn't even have money. And I think after a couple of days, my parents traced me. The second time I ran away, I walked from Rolongo to Nairobi town, the CBD. It's like 30 kilometers. And for me, it was because life was unbearable in my home, and I couldn't keep being in a space where I was constantly being abused. And my parents were also abusing each other because of the fights. They were really nasty things. I say I wish they had a happier marriage. I wish it would have been better. But from what I gather, my parents married really young. My mom probably got married when she was 19 as a result of a pregnancy. And she has not known any other life, just life with my dad, for most of her adulthood. And the same thing with my dad. I mean, they were really, really young. There were so many things about themselves they did not know, about who they were, about what they wanted to become in future. There are so many things. And so they started fighting those days, and it was funny because my dad was a very religious man in the Catholic Church. So it was so interesting. On Saturday nights, he'll be brought home by his friends because he couldn't walk on his own because he's drunk. And on Sunday afternoon, when we go to church together, he's reading announcements at the pulpit. That was very confusing for me. It was always like he had two worlds inside him and something within him was fighting or something. But what changed also is the more money he started earning, the more violent he became at home. And those fights started becoming worse and worse and worse. And I remember even one night, my mom forgot to do something for the village they have in Ugenya. And my dad pounced on her back and started pulling her hair until this hairline started bleeding, and that night I pounced on him trying to separate his grip from mom's hairline because she was kneeling on the carpet because of something so small. And I felt like I wanted to kill him that night. It's just that I'm thankful for senses because I was ready, either we both die or one of us goes. I was tired. I was just tired of violence. Like those guys fought corner to corner from the time I was probably 6, 7 years old to the time I was 24, 25. Those were so many years of witnessing all these things, and it was like sometimes if somebody is holding a knife, I've witnessed my mom's blood, too much of it, just too much blood, and that was too much trauma for me. Now, the funny thing about the spacing between me and my siblings, it's very accidental. All of us have left each other by 7 years. So I have 2 other siblings. I'm the firstborn, and then there's a guy after me, and then our only little princess, who's by now 2021, she's 18. But the thing is, my mom first had, her first baby, she lost her first baby before me. And then I came along. I survived, clearly. And then she had a miscarriage after me. And then she gave birth to a girl after that, who died when she was 5 months, who was actually the reason I started writing poetry. I'll explain later. And then my brother came, who survived. And then she gave birth to my sister in 2002. And then she had another miscarriage during post-election violence here in 2008. So it just so happened that after all those losses, we left each other by 7 years. So by the time I was 16, 16 minus 7 is what? 9? My brother was 9. He couldn't understand much of what was really happening at home. My sister was 2. She couldn't understand much of what was happening at home. And when I finished high school and just about when I was getting to campus, my brother by that time was getting to high school. So he was away from home. And he didn't witness a lot of these things. I took a lot of those punches and it was just too tough. I was forced to grow up so fast, faster than my brain was ready for. And those things had very serious implications on my adult life, especially in my 20s, and I didn't know how that would manifest. When I ran away from home the second time to town, I was living in the streets, basically, surviving there. I stayed in the streets for 2 weeks before I was found. And as a 16-year-old in Nairobi streets at night in June, it was rough, really, really rough. And you see the world from a very different point of view. Now, Nairobi is very different at night, very different place at night. And you see, I used to hang out at Koinange Street, which is like Nairobi's red light district. And those commercial sex workers were actually my friends. They would protect me from Kanjo and all this. I was such a harmless little thing. You'd see me, very innocent. You wouldn't even think I could harm a fly. But one of the things that really transformed my life was, even out there, I had a pen and I had a notebook. I used to write what I was seeing. There are so many complex stories. It's not one homogeneous thing that, oh, street kids are all like this or like that, So yes, for many kids actually know where their parents are, but they choose a different place. Because when somewhere stops being conducive for your own dignity, you'd rather be disrespected by strangers. You choose that. You choose to be disrespected by strangers than people who people who you are supposed to trust. You'd take that in. And so out there now, I used to say I was shoplifting from supermarkets. Those days, supermarkets didn't have cameras like they do these days. So I'd steal like dairy fresh milk, things to survive out there. And I learned so much about life until one day when I was caught. On 20th June 2004, I'll never forget, it was a Sunday, man. I had stolen some, now I was out there in the street, I wasn't drinking enough water. So my lips had started cracking and it was very, very painful. So I went to steal a petroleum jelly, this Vaseline thing. With some milk, because I loved milk, was just sustaining me. It was, you could carry, you could drink it, And so that Sunday, something told me, let's go and look out for more. Kale kashetani kanakuambia tu enda utafute ingine. So I went to Naivas. Naivas was also a very small supermarket those days. We had a Naivas supermarket along Ronald Ngala Street. I don't know if it's still there. So I got in. It was around 7 p.m. I went to the fridge to try and get bigger milk. And I have no idea where I had planned to take this thing. There was no way I could hide it. I don't know what was wrong with me. Yeah. So this attendant who was trying to clean the place because they were about to close told me, kijana, shop haraka, tunataka kufunga. So I kept just rotating this place, rotating, trying to, you do the vectors and, just trying to calculate. So eventually I realized I couldn't take the big milk I wanted, so I just resorted to taking the small dairy fresh I was used to. And this guy, because I think he had been watching me for quite a while, walked up to me, and I had this long-sleeved top, and I had tried to hide the milk here. And so he just opened up my palm and saw the milk on my hand. My guy, the slap that guy gave me, I still remember it to date. Ilinirusha kwa shelf huko yo. And then he just shouted mwizi. You know, Kenyans, we are a very enthusiastic lot. Any chance of violence we are given, pounce on it. Free lunch, I was beaten up. In like 5 minutes, my head was swollen. They took everything out, even the stuff I had stolen from another supermarket. They thought it was theirs, my notebook, everything. So they called the manager. He came, and he looked at those things. He took my notebook. So my notebook had like numbers. Those earlier notebooks that had numbers of people, like you had space to write phone numbers and names and everything. And he looked at me and was like, Kijana, you have a very good handwriting. What are you doing here? And I told him, my parents refused to pay fees for me. Okay. Where do you live? I live in Mlolongo. So is this your father's number? Yes. If we call him, will he come? Yeah, he should. So the funny thing about that evening is my dad, at that very moment, was just from reporting at a police station where my uncle, who was a policeman, was working in Kamukunji, that I am missing. So my dad was in town. Yeah, he was just from reporting that I'm missing. I've been away. Nobody knows where I am. In 2 minutes, he shows up with this big Ericsson phone in his hand like this. It was a movie scene, man, And he gets in, the shoppers are standing, they're looking at me. My dad is coming in like Rambo. and he's like, Kijana, this is the life you want. Yeah. And then he pays for those things that I stole. And then we walk out. Now, when we get out of the supermarket, he hires a taxi. And he wants me to be put in the boot. But the driver refuses. The driver asks, hii ni kijana yako? Wacha tu akae tu kwa gari. Tafadhali mzee. Kumbe, this guy had bought a nyaunyo, a whip, for the day I would come back home. So he was just waiting for me. Yeah. We got home. He unleashed his new weapon, ready to pounce on my body again. And it was the first day I stood up to my dad and I told him, you're not beating me. You're not beating me. And true to it, it was the last day he beat me. I think just being in the streets and seeing everything I saw, I think it toughened me up a little, And I was at the edge of life because every time something happens, you want to step on me. Every time you want to step on me, I couldn't take it anymore. I was like, fine, you have your demons, but you've given them to me also. Now they are mine. Now I can't take it anymore. And he actually started fukuzaing me in the house, nikaenda nikajificha kwa bafu, and he just had to calm down and started talking to me civilly, like, okay, what is wrong with you? What do you need at home? What is going on? And I started talking, and I hoped that was the space we would have. But it's not like that was the end of violence at home. It was the end of him beating me up, but the violence at home still kept on. Him and mom were still fighting. In fact, it will surprise you that my mother has just gotten the energy to live on her own this year. Literally 3 weeks ago, as I say this, she's just moved into her own house. It's like she's starting life from scratch. And to me, that is liberation. Every child wants to see their parents happy, subconsciously. Yeah, you want to see your caregivers. These are the first human beings you're living with, ideally, right? You're connected to them in your DNA. You want to see them happy. The second thing is every son, every boy child wants to be like their father. They want to be close to their father. They want to be friends with their father. My dad and I, in fact, we weren't always fighting. In fact, when I was younger, Dad was such a good guy, you know. He used to like buy me Taifa Leo newspapers, and I'd sit on his lap, and you know he'd teach me how to read and everything. In fact, at home we loved music so much, both my maternal and paternal families. So Dad had this little Sanyo radio. He would place me when I was 5, 6 years. He would place me on a table, living room table, and put Sanyo the radio thing on and tell me to dance for him. That became our bonding, in a way. So every time I saw Dad, I knew it is time to dance, you know. I grew up dancing on tables until I was like 12 years old. My brother grew, we used to dance on tables together, because now, you know, those days Lingala was more popular than it is today in Kenya and everything. So for me, actually, Lingala was like my first love because of its connection with me and Dad. Because we used to sit down to watch music videos. There used to be this channel called STV that used to bring like Lingala music for 3 hours every Friday evening. So every time it is Friday evening, me and Dad would sit together just to watch music videos. And he'd tell me all these things about Sijui Pepe Kale, Koffi Olomide, Yondo Sister, Alus Mabile, all these people. And so as I grew up, I think also for him, his traumas also caught up with him, you know. And he became more distant, you know, he was more violent, he drank more. And then now that was separation. And that was also very painful for me. So I wanted on one side to be close to him, and on the other side, I wanted my family to just have a peaceful home. So by this time, I was at the edge of edges. I wanted them to just sort these things out. I couldn't imagine my sister growing up in a broken home, as I did, and my brother growing up in a broken home, as I did. So that is like almost you're parenting the whole household. You want people to like talk. They are adults, they are older than you, but they can't get along. So what do? It's almost like you're the sober person there. When I got to 29 years old, I actually got another bout of depression. And it came with suicidal thoughts. And in fact, at 16, that time I was 16, I also became suicidal. In fact, the third time I ran away from home, now I wanted to go kill myself. Somewhere nobody knew me. So I stole my dad's ATM. I hadn't even used an ATM before. I remember queuing in hapo kwa ATM machine. You know, I have very innocent eyes. So I looked at this adult and I told her, you know, baba yangu ni mgonjwa, and he sent me to withdraw some money for him, but I don't know how to use this thing. Would you show me? Me, I just wanted fair. You know, I wanted 500 shillings, not even much, just 500, to go to Mombasa and rot somewhere and die, you know. But it so happened that I had some schoolmates from Malindi. And so when I got to Mombasa, in fact, when I got to Mtito one day, you know, that heat starts hitting you. And you're like, do I really want to die? Am I sure I want to die? So I thought like, hey, kina Tony live in Malindi. Maybe I could try get to them. You know, it's another long story, but I got there eventually and they took me in for that month. So I'm getting suicidal thoughts almost 10, 20, 12, 13 years later. I'm 29 years old, early 2017. I'm getting off a toxic relationship. I do not have a job. My life is a mess. I can't understand why I'm constantly feeling depressed. What's wrong with me? So I think to myself, you know, in fact, I remember going home. I was having a meeting with some guy who had employed me, and he told me he can't pay me any longer because his business is not doing okay. So it felt like my life was now just crumbling even further. I went home, I took a shower for like 2 hours. the water was just running, and I'm thinking, what do I do with myself when I get out of this place? I was living on the second floor of a building. Niruke, niende juu zaidi, nijirushe, nijifunge, ninyonge na kamba kwa hii nyumba, nifanye nini? Because I don't see any way forward with myself. Just as it was when I was 16 years old, words came to my rescue. So I got out of the shower, wet as I was. I opened up my laptop and I went to Facebook and I wrote, I have depression and I'm feeling suicidal today. And that was it. That's also what changed everything. Because yes, previously I had been writing about gender-based violence because of how I grew up and everything. But depression, that was a very new angle. Very few people, if anything, were talking about it. Even father men were talking about this thing. So coming out with my story on depression and suicide ideation changed my life in a way I had never anticipated. So many people came out in support of me. What moved me more were the many other people who got to my DMs saying, I'm also going through this thing, but I can't talk about it, I don't know what to do. And so it piqued my interest because I wanted to understand how is it that as a society we are not talking about these issues? Why are we afraid of talking about them? That's on one side. On the other side, I felt if I didn't understand this thing this time, next time it will come back, it will actually take me down because it was a very familiar feeling. I had grown up in it since my teenage years. I wanted to understand it for once, When I went online to open up about my depression, I was looking for a release. The same way at 16 when I began writing poetry, I was looking for a release. And it was at the time the nearest thing I could get to for me to get that release. And so, from there now I started writing about my healing journey and what it's like to wake up and feeling like your body imekata, you just can't do anything. Some days the only thing I would do was spread my bed and do nothing else. Yes, so through that writing about my healing journey, I got to talk to so many people, which made me even more interested in understanding mental health. But at some point, I also really felt cheated. Cheated in the sense that I was 29 years old, and in all my life, all the education I've been through, nobody had taught me how my mind works. Nobody had taught me the importance of taking care of my mind. They taught me algebra, they taught me where Mantulongo notice, they taught me, very simple things about the biology of a body and stuff, thorax, abdomen, things I'm not even using it. But my mind, the thing that's keeping me alive, nobody has ever taught me about that. I was angry, actually. I was really, really angry. And I was like, we are being cheated. Like, what? How come we're not even being taught about who we are from childhood? Nobody's teaching you about how to understand who you are, how to understand your emotions, how to understand your thoughts, how to process them. Nobody's teaching us that. So we become adults, we are facing things, we think violence is the only way out because that's how we've been conditioned to be. So, or getting into drugs or sex addiction or things like that. So it illuminated a new path for me in the sense that beyond wanting to understand how these mental health conditions manifest in somebody's life and how they can affect them, it also gave me a path to my own life because I could go back and figure, oh, okay, Dad was going through this because of that. Oh, so this is why he became this. Oh, so for me, this is why this happened, that happened. So it explains ABCD, and that was life-changing. I have had to be very conscious and intentional about understanding myself. Because after seeing nobody was going to do that for me, it also felt like I either do it or somebody else uses me for their own benefit. And what did that make me do? I went and read and searched and read and searched and talked to people and talked to all these therapists and psychologists and all these people. I wanted to understand, all right? Why? What I came to know is your brain is a simulation machine. It repeats patterns. Yeah? Our behaviors become behaviors because they are patterns of things that were done over and over that we picked up from. That's why you see children wearing their parents' shoes. They see their parents do this. We learn from what we see, right? And because I wanted a different life for myself, for my future, for the future communities I wanted to create, it meant I had to stop my brain from simulating the violence I was taught, the violence I was conditioned to, and create a new brain for myself. And that also feels like building another world because of the energy it takes. Now, when you go through something traumatizing as a child, yeah, your brain could forget it, but your nervous system stores the memory. So that's why you hear somebody is taken to the hospital, maybe their body feels sickly, but there's no disease that is being found, okay? Trauma responses manifest in very many different ways. Yeah? Some people become anxious, some people overeat, some people overwork, some people's bodies develop, their immune systems go down, so they are prone to illnesses. It's very many things. Some people resort to drug abuse and substance. Some people are also very violent, you know, as a coping mechanism because they're trying to protect themselves. They don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want, you know. Is it helping me to go on that healing journey and to be vocal about it? Very, very much. Because I keep affirming myself that that difficult life I started with is not how I will end my life. I said I had to accept how my parents were, yeah, and the upbringing I had. I accepted it, but I didn't own it because that wasn't what was supposed to happen. I deserved a healthy home. I deserved healthy parents. I deserved love. And since I couldn't get those things as a child, I had to learn how to give them to myself. Okay? And by doing so, I was rewiring my brain to be safe for me, so that I could be productive for me, so that I could even be productive for other people. Now, because of those experiences as a child, you haven't seen what a healthy relationships looks like. It was very hard for me to keep healthy relationships as well. I struggled, especially in my 20s, because trusting was such a difficult thing. My dad, being the person I should have trusted first, hurt me most. So I wasn't, you know, with mom it was confusing because sometimes I felt like she would have protected me, but then I came to understand she couldn't because she was also trying to protect herself and it was just too much going on. So you can't be you can't be there for your child the way you want to be there for your child. Yeah. But my mother, I think at some point she noticed that I had been struggling emotionally. And in fact, even, you know, previously in my teenage life, she used to shout a lot at me. Then as I grew older, she became a bit more gentle. I think she understood that I had been struggling. Dad, everything just passed him. He was just lost in his own world, trying to get by. Everything has to go in his own way. You have to stick to his script. Anything outside that means war. Yeah? And so in my 20s now, you're meeting girls and your body's feeling excited and nobody has ever taught you anything about sex. Nobody has ever taught you about even the church we go to. Do you know how far we are from the pastor up there? Very far. He's on the pulpit. You don't know anything about this guy's life. You don't even know if the pastor struggles. So where is vulnerability? Nobody's really reaching out to you as a young person to say, you know what, you're actually not alone struggling with these emotions. Your parents don't talk to you about their problems. The pastor doesn't talk to you about what he's going through. People look so okay. They're all pretending they're fine. So where do you take your struggling emotions? It's a struggle. And I realized, no, society is lying to me. Everybody is lying to me. And you know what? As a first step, I'll be the first man to start talking. So I'll talk. And I won't care whether I'll be judged because I'm a guy, I'm an African man. People look at you in certain ways because it's you want to be like a woman. It's only women who express themselves like that and stuff like that. But I'm like, if these things I'm doing will help me live longer, a happier, healthier life, man, it's not a mistake that women generally live longer than men. It's not a mistake. Outside how physically testing men's lives have been, it's also because we keep all that pain inside. It's not healthy. For example, even geography. Why is a salty water lake salty? Because it only has an inlet, it doesn't have an outlet. A freshwater lake is fresh because it has both inlets and outlets. Your heart has veins that pump blood in and pump blood out. If it was only inlet, we wouldn't even survive, right? Our brains need air. People faint because oxygen is out from the brain. You collapse. So essentially, space is basic to everything. If you do not have space, you do not have life. And me growing up in that kind of lack of space in my home, I couldn't talk. I could not imagine spending the rest of my life quiet. Now, as I grow older, now I'm an adult, I am a man, everybody else, apart from my own home, now expects me to even be more quiet. That is a death I was not ready to take, my friend. So yeah, I struggle through my relationships and even work because when you do not know how to express yourself, you wouldn't know how to say when you're unhappy. People will step on you. I didn't know how to keep boundaries because as a child, my boundaries were overstepped. It took me so long to learn these things, to learn how to say, I need this, I need help, to learn how to say, I need support, I am not happy with this, I'm not happy with that, can I get assistance? It took me so long to learn that. Now, the way I was conditioned and the way many boys are socialized, you grow up thinking men know everything because apparently dad is the one calling the shots at home. Men are the ones controlling resources everywhere you go. So you actually think that a man asking for help, a man asking for directions is a bad thing to say. And because of that inner sense of light, I felt like I think I'm different. I think that light within me wants to express itself. I think there's so much, by the way, one of the reasons I started writing was because I had so much pain. I thought if I didn't express it, I was going to die. And so over the years, I am just incredibly thankful for choosing me, for choosing to do life the way I believe life should be led. And that is expressing myself, because without that, I wouldn't be here. When I sat my dad down and he told me that he couldn't come to me with his problems because I think he's weak, it was the first time I also humanized him. It was the first time I looked at him from outside, from a bit of afar. There's a quote that says, if you want to look at the whole picture, look outside the frame. If you're in the frame, you can't see the whole picture. Get outside the frame. So I had to leave my emotions for a while and look at this man and ask myself, why did he say that statement? Why? Where was that coming from? And so I went back and I wanted to understand his childhood from a genuinely curious place. and realizing he also grew up in a violent place. And his father was a polygamist. His father, my grandpa, even fought for in the Second World War in Burma. And a lot of those African men who fought for the British had serious post-traumatic stress that manifested in their lives differently. Some became completely redundant, they couldn't do anything. Some became struggling alcoholics. Their families just withered away. And that's almost what happens to mine as well. Because grandpa with his drinking, violence, and then our homes being very patriarchal, if something is wrong with the man, the whole house goes down, And so understanding my dad from that point of view helped me know where to start, because I knew if I was to heal, I had to understand him. If I was to know where to go, I would have to know where he's been. And that's the biggest thing that changed, because now I could tell it was because of what he saw. He also had a lot of childhood abandonment issues that he was very subconscious about. And so it was funny, because now I started looking at my dad as also a child who was in pain, and it didn't excuse what he was doing, but I understood it. I understood, but I didn't excuse. What that gave me was a bit more emotional intelligence, because now I knew how to protect myself when he would act out. I could even advise my mother better, I think me going out to look for information is one of the things that has also healed my family to some extent. It has made my brother know a couple of things. We are very close with my sister. I tell her about these things all the time. It changed my journey. It changed me, because I finally found a place to start. I could write poetry, I could write articles, I could write things that will make people feel stuff, and that's exactly where I started. So I'd go to campus, because I couldn't go to class. I'd go to the computer lab, and I would read and read and read and write and write and write. So I started sharing my poetry online, and I met other poets, and we started meeting up. I performed in school, and I got opportunities to start performing in town like Nairobi, and slowly by slowly people start engaging with myself, with my work, with my poetry, and that gave me a lot of courage actually, and my mom really supported me through it. But then as I grew older now, the dream of becoming a journalist suddenly felt so small, because I felt I had a bigger voice than simply sitting at a news editor desk somewhere editing stories. I felt like not only now did I want to tell people stories in a newspaper, I wanted people to write stories about me. I wanted to go to those newsrooms as invited guests. And I said, it's going to happen, by the way. I manifested that life. I said, it's going to happen. Many people would get back to me saying they are looking for a place to get help. They're looking for information. So I set up a 200-member mental health support group online. It's just a WhatsApp group. I made a call on my socials, and people reached out, like 200 people reached out. So I opened 2 WhatsApp groups, and I told them, guys, look, nobody knows everything here. So we are developing a community that is like a village. All of us are here, all of us are important, all of us are creating content. Live as if you're living in a village the way you'd want your village to run. And that's how it became. So when you need information, when you're struggling with something, you put it there and somebody else reaches out to you. Because it was increasingly difficult for me to reach to every individual who was texting me, who was inboxing me. It was overwhelming. And so as that was happening, I took a trauma healing course. That would enable me to be a certified trauma healing facilitator or counselor. And through that, I support especially people who are battling with childhood traumas. And we are so many, you'd be surprised, we are so many, from CEOs to fundi wa viatu, people battling with their relationship with their father, relationship with their mother, relationship with their siblings, relationship with their old tribe, like things people are holding in their hearts that they're struggling with, they don't have a language to express. I think the fact that I did the emotional labor all these years was setting me up for this moment. And every time people talk to me about this, what they're going through, and I tell them, okay, you need some sessions with me, we need to take you through. I find it so easy because I speak a language they understand. I have words for things they've been battling to express for years, and some of them are 60-year-olds, some of them are 15, some of them are 26. And you know what? Sometimes it feels like sitting outside the earth and looking at the earth rotating and just wondering, whoa, those marvelous human beings, man, they've been through pain. Man, they've been through pain, you know. I also have set up like a safe space for men who have been sexually abused, which is another long story that I didn't share. One of the purposes I think I have in life is to support men to humanize themselves. You know, we've grown up in a world where your idea of God comes in the shape of a man, right? The idea of the head of the home comes in the shape of a man. The idea of a leader, all the big leaders you've seen probably in all your life globally, have come in the shape of a man. But this same man, you can't talk to him. You can't see him. You can't see his emotions. This dad, this priest, this politician, this president, you can't reach him. He looks okay, he's rich, he looks wealthy, he looks all well put together, but you can't see his emotions. He only expresses himself when he's extremely happy or extremely sad. When he's extremely sad, he's angry, he's violent. When he's extremely happy, he's with women and alcohol and doing all kinds of nasty stuff. So in the subconscious of a young boy, you're living in the negative energy, because you do not have communities of healthy men around you. They're not there. Even in church today, those people, you can just count them. You can count them, brother. You know? And I'm like, the same life force that God created me with, I want to create life for these communities where men can rethink themselves. Men can re-see and start to imagine themselves differently. The things you were told about who a man is supposed to be, all of them were created. It was somebody else's idea. So you can have your own idea of who a man is supposed to be or who you want to be as a man, right? And I said, oh, you know, they said this, they gave me this, they give me this, I will give them this because I want healthier communities. When we sort out the issues men have with themselves, security will improve, governance will improve, relationships will improve, urban development will improve, nearly everything will improve. We rely on women on emotional labor because we were separated from our emotions from a young age. It was beaten out of us. Don't cry, be hard, nini, 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 nini. So you become an adult and all of a sudden you're in a relationship and this woman expects you to show your emotions. You don't know how to show your emotions. You don't know how to open up. And even today, I can't just walk up to a guy and tell him, yo, open up a little. There's no system. They don't have it, you know? So my stories are what give men that chance to re-see themselves. Like, guys, we are human beings, just like the women around us. Whatever you want to do, just humanize yourself. You don't have to go with what society is telling you. You know, also now even the thing about crying, there are some quarters where, you know, men have been made to feel like if you don't cry, you're not doing it enough. You're not being vulnerable enough. You know, people have different ways of expressing pain. as long as they know they have that space to express pain in whatever manner is comfortable to them, that is what vulnerability is. And we cannot be vulnerable according to social standards if we have not learned how to be vulnerable to our own selves. What are men doing? What are we doing as peers to say, let's come together and do something different? But we can't do that because individually we are struggling with things we don't talk about. You get? So we can't get together. Women struggle, but they get together. That's how they are able to move. We struggle, we can't get together because we fear each other. Kevota nionaje? Nikienda kwa Brayo ni msho, heri tuende tukakunywe hii story tuishe. You know? So I'm like, I want to create a different life where the boys that are growing up right now and men who are willing to have a different life can give themselves a chance to heal. I was recently featured on the BBC. Let me tell you, you know, like they translate these stories to different languages. And man, men from South America, men from the deepest places of this earth reaching out to me saying, you know what, I do not think I have the courage to express myself like you do in my own community. This is not just an African man's thing. This is a global man's thing. Men are struggling all over the world to talk, just talking, you know. The impact is, I have like 19-year-olds reaching out to me saying, you know, I'm struggling with masturbation, I'm struggling with sex addiction, I'm struggling with substance abuse. I was raped when I was 19, I was raped when I was this. In fact, there's a story of a guy who reached out to me and he told me that he was sodomized by friends, people he knew. They sodomized and robbed him, and he got so mad, so angry, he hired goons to go kill them. And he told me he's sure they can't do such a thing to another person because they are rotting in their graves. That is one story. Every day I'm getting stories. Do you know how much pain that is, that people are holding? A guy, you wouldn't even know, very smartly dressed, kawaida person, you'd think, oh, because he has a job, because he has a car, maybe even a family. People reach out to me saying, you know, this thing happened to me when I was 16. I'm struggling in my marriage right now. I can't share this with my wife because I fear how she's going to see me. You know, boys who were abused when they were kids. Pastors reach out to me. They stand on pulpits, my brother, but with so much pain they can't speak with in their congregations. And you know, that's why, like, my work has changed how I see the world, man. Today, even when I think of church, it's not what I grew up knowing. When I think of church, I feel every home should be a church. Every home, every space should be a safe space. Everywhere we go, we have to develop trauma-informed communities where we can humanize one another, where the first instinct when I see you and you're in trousers and a shirt, I'm not boxing you. You're a guy, so I want to treat you like this because of the traumas other men have taken me through. I need to have that safety to feel that I can heal from things I go through so that I don't keep replicating it into my other relationships. Our bodies carry our emotions. Our bodies carry our truths. Our bodies carry our secrets and all our love, all our pain. You have to take care of your body. It is the secret of health. Take care of your body. Check what you're eating. Check who you're hanging around. Check the kind of work, how much rest you're getting. Check what you're feeding your mind. Take care of your body. And I understand we are living in a world of so many inequalities. In fact, many people in this world do works that are very indignifying. Communities are everything. We do not heal in isolation. And how that works is there is something in science called neuroception. So neuroception is the ability of your nervous system to distinguish whether a person or a place or a situation is safe or unsafe for you. Okay? Now, why healthy relationships make us thrive is because our nervous systems are connecting. When our nervous systems connect in a healthy way, our bodies are like electricity. When we connect nicely, we thrive, we lighten up. So that's why when you stay in healthy relationships and communities, people who've been living in those situations are happier, they're healthier, they also live longer. Okay, and your immune system also is very strong. You're less prone to illnesses. When your nervous system is not in a place to read situations appropriately, it means you're probably living in trauma. So that means that explains why some people find themselves in abusive relationships over and over again, because their nervous system is weak. They can't coordinate, this is a good place, this is not a good place for me. Okay, so healthy communities are the way out. Okay, and I understand people have different personalities. Some people, like me, sometimes I'm an introvert. I like staying on my own and stuff like that. But on the larger context, make sure you have communities of people who you support and people who support you. Justus, it's usually the hardest question anybody asks me. The advice I would give somebody who feels they are on the edge, because myself, I had also given up. You know, I don't like giving motivational quotes about, create some hope and keep on going. You're gonna feel like giving up. This is real life. This is real life. You're gonna go through things that will make you feel this is not worth it, you know. And I usually just tap back to what I did. I don't tell people what they should do. I tell people what I did. I reached out to the last ounce of light that was left within me. That's what I did. Sometimes, because home was unbearable, I ran away from home. So I ran away from the trouble. It saved my life. And you know, I can't tell that to a parent and a child situation, because that is like bad advice, you know. And those situations exist because there is no space. So can we create those spaces where parents and children can speak in their homes? Because children run away from home because of lack of that space, right? I wrote when it was too much for me, when I was on the edge, you know. I'm so lucky to have a group of male friends whom I've known for the last 10 years, who have held me together through these issues. And so when I came out with my stories on depression, they didn't understand what depression was. Nobody in my circles knew what depression was. But what did my friends do? They would come to my house, male friends, They would wash my house, they would cook for me, they would open my curtains. We have a DJ in there who's also a banker, so he would come to my house and he'd do live mixes in the house just to liven me up. So sometimes we are afraid we will be misunderstood because people won't understand. But people who love you don't have to understand everything. They just know you're not okay. Okay, how can we support you? We will show up in the ways we can. You know, can we create those kind of relationships, those kind of communities? That's what has saved my life. You know, there's a phrase in psychology we say, trauma that is not transformed is transferred. If you don't transform your pain into something else, you're going to transfer it. So that's what has been happening in many of our homes. What I would wish, specifically because this is what created a lot of pain for me, is that parents to just know their children are on their side. Your children are on your side. Your children don't need to see you as a perfect parent. Your children, you don't need to be rich so that your children can see that you work so hard to take them to these places and these places. No. Sometimes children just want to be held. They just want to be affirmed. You know what? You're a bright kid. You know what? You became number 16, number 17 out of 20. You can do better. Keep going. Not every time fingers, 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 fingers. Every time kiboko, kiboko, kiboko. It's not working. It's not been working. Then we create adults who are also angry. It's the same thing when we were in high school, in boys' schools. Umeingia Form 1, a Form 4 is bullying you. When you get to Form 4, you do the same thing to a Form 1. It's the same thing. Those are vicious cycles of violence. We have to stop it. If we are to live in this world sustainably, we can't keep going on with all this mayhem. Our families are dying. There is a chance for all of us to heal. If it happened for me, it can happen for you. It seemed like my life was down and out. I had given up so many times on myself. But if I got here, it means there is space. It means there is chance. And how that chance happened, I also gave it to myself. So give yourself a chance. Go out, look for information, call people. And you know what? It might look like very ashaming in the beginning because you're afraid, because you fear to be judged and all that. But do you know what? It will only end at judgment. This is your life. Take charge. Give yourself a chance to heal, like I did. And I'm so happy that I gave myself a chance to heal, because I wouldn't be here for sure.
I mean, here I was going to America. Going to America at a squeezy. I see guys want to go to America now. You can find America in Runda here. That was America, you guys. This was the first thing that I had done that had worked. Finally, I was a success, even to my peers. I was going to America. So I was trying to do all manner of things, trying to find that particular job, that one that will kick. So eventually it did. This job was hefty. It came with a company van, an unlimited fuel, card, and then I used to clock in through the phone. I mean, I would wake up in the morning, and after they're done training, so I would wake up and then I'd say, this is, in those days I was Levi. Levi Conness becomes Levi Cones. You can imagine in your 20s, you earn a bit of money like me. I bought a BMW that was not even worth it. But I did it because I always wanted to own one. And there I was living in a condo in Chicago eventually before I got out. But I was on the 23rd floor, overlooking the whole city, paying $1,700 for it per week because of lifestyle. So really, after a while, I would clock in and not go. Now, because I've had money now, I'm tangatying this fuel card I'm using it. I'm even fueling my sister's car, I'm fueling the buddy's car, I'm doing all manner of things. I ended up at a point where when the American journey was coming to an end, it was a very heavy journey for me because I landed back here with nothing. The opportunities are so many. Yet when you do not do anything with your life, it catches up with you. Hi, my name is Levi Conness. I am a father, a husband. I'm an author. I'm also a journalist. I recently wrote this book called There Is No Useless Experience, which is basically many stories of my life combined together to bring in some lessons. For example, I talk about, my childhood and knowing your value and how you can be misused when you're young and in your 20s. I talk about how I went to the US and the things that happened there and how I got deported and came back. I talk about how I battled with cancer and what happened in my cancer journey, as well as what has happened with me and the issues to do with weight loss and fighting weight. I also speak extensively about matters to do with self-discipline, as well as matters to do with making money, solving your problems by making money, as well as the interaction of social media and how I almost, or is it almost, or became, I think I'm banned from Rwanda. It's an interesting story because of a tweet. Anyway, those are some of the things I talk about in my book. And let's get into it. I grew up in a family of 4. I had one elder sister and we were 3 boys. And I remember those years, we went to, I would say good schools, although there were even government schools. I went to Plainsview Primary School. After some point, I think my parents were really looking for, like the, quintessential middle class family. They're always looking for that thing they can give their children better. And I went to Khalsa. And when I was in Khalsa, I got into a bit of trouble and I had to be removed after a week. Yeah, it's not a very good story, but we waylaid a young Indian boy, the guy, have those turbans, and we removed his turban. And apparently that's quite a taboo. So the Asian community was up in arms, and my dad, I think, thought something would happen to me, and I was pulled out of that school. At some point in class 7, when they realized that I was getting into bad company, hanging around matatus, the manyangas were then starting to come around South B, playing loud music and all that. And I think my parents felt, this was not going to be a good environment for me. So they moved me to Kaptagat Preparatory out in Wasingishu, which was an excellent school, a private school. I mean, this school had a swimming pool, it had horse riding, it had, we were eating sausages in the morning. It was something else. And I began to mingle with children I had not mingled with before, who are what I would call, the high class type. I should say this. I was in a Christian home with very strict conservative values. We were not allowed to do a lot of things. I couldn't even do a box, which was the most famed hairstyle at that time. In fact, the one time I tried to do a box and I walked around with a kofia for several days, in the house I was busted, and frog marched to the kinyozi and chini. So moving to Eldoret was okay because for the first time since my childhood, my parents now lived separately because my mother's job had not given her a transfer. So we kept a house in Nairobi. But my dad did move to Eldoret. He also got a house there. And for 2 or 3 years, we juggled back and forth, giving me some room for exploration. So about my father, we nicknamed him Saddam, me and my sister, because at that moment in time, Hussein was bombing Kuwait, and we knew him as a dictator, a tyrant, and that is what we had attributed to my dad. My dad was that guy who his things had to work out a certain way. It was more like a military style of thing. And I think in some ways it's good. Some things rubbed off on me, honestly speaking, because this guy, he paid his bills on time. He came to school when he was needed to come to school. He paid school fees on time. We were never sent home, for things like school fees, arrears, and all that. But then he also looked at your work. So you came from school, he wanted to see what's your homework like. What have you done? Who are you hanging with? And, what are you doing with your holiday? You had to give him a timetable for your holiday. So for us, it was a military, environment. Hence the name Saddam. Now, in terms of relationship speaking, did we do anything really for fun? No, not much. I'll be honest. We would never be caught like watching TV together, for example, because he would have something to say about programs that were not Christian, And as a result, I think there was that kind of drift between us in terms of us. And I remember one time my sister had a kofia written Chicago White Sox. And for some reason, my father read it as sex. Oh, I tell you, it was crazy. Either them somos we used to get and the biblical teachings, that was what seemed enough at that moment in time. And I also remember one time I was watching a movie called Passenger 57. It's a Wesley Snipes movie. It's really basically about, Wesley Snipes. He goes into the airplane and he's kung fuing and kicking everyone. And finally, the plane has been hijacked, but he takes it back. And my dad walked in and I had not noticed. And I was watching this movie and he said, "What's that you're watching?" And I said, it's a Passenger 57. What's that about? Oh, it's this guy. He hijacks the plane. There's some hijackers who take the plane and then he's taking it back from them. I'm done. Then he sends and he's like, so you want to be hijacker now? Unazima tu TV unaenda, So in some ways, and I think many parents were like that, and I don't want to blame him because I think that was all they knew to do at that time. Given the fact that the world was also changing for them, much as it's changing for us as well. Things were coming in, these hairstyles were changing. Rap music was just, and hip hop was just also coming alive. No one was really understanding the language of Sheng. I can actually relate now as a parent with what was happening, and the only way they knew how to do it was to throw, the good book at it and throw the Christian principles, and I think that's what was happening with him. I was, resilient because I thought that some other homes I could see, the children were doing much different things in their particular homes. You know how those homes where guys are high-fiving their dads and they're also joking around with them and they're going on trips. We went for one trip to Mombasa, and that one trip, I remember it very well. My dad was in trousers the entire time, and actually in a kaunda suit on the beach. So it's because I don't think he wanted to show his legs. That would be another story altogether. So maybe there was a taboo in that. But as a result, the resilience came in various forms, because when I was in Form 1, in my first term in Form 1, I got suspended, which was a big deal because first, it had never happened in the school I was in. And secondly, I was a Form 1 student. I mean, how does a Form 1 student get suspended in the first term? What did I do? What I did was, I got involved with some elder students, Form 3s, Form 4s, who, because we were in a mixed school and they were going to visit the girls' dormitory, they needed somebody who was a lookout. So there I was, assigned the job of a lookout as a mono, and I climbed up a tree. In fact, we were two of us. And our job was, basically, kama kuna noma, you just say, cuckoo, cuckoo. So before we cuckooed twice, we had been caught by the watchman. And from March to the headmaster's office, the principal then, and because it was a few weeks to the end of the term, nothing much was said. We were caned, the usual slasher, you do all those kind of things. But when I went home from school, because my sister was in the same school, she was given a letter to take to my dad. And that letter was a letter indicating that I had been suspended. I should come after 2 weeks when schools reopen with both my parents. So that letter was really the beginning of a major division between me and my dad, I think. Because I think by that time he was really disappointed. And the way he reacted to it is when he came to school, he caned me in front of the whole assembly. Yeah. Which never improved relations between us at all. I think it was overkill, because it was like, he actually volunteered, the principal watcher, let me deal with this. I think he really wanted to smash that resilience that he was noticing. But in the process, I think it triggered something else in me in terms of just being defiant, especially not just to him, but to even what he was propagating in terms of, Christianity, in terms of the Bible, the love of God. It was just like, that left me. I never joined the CU, for example, for the 4 years I was in high school. Never did. Yet my father would come and preach, even to the CU. I was never a member. I think the kiboko has its place. I'm not one of those propagators who think that, don't ever use the kiboko. I think it also has, how do I call it, a shelf life, because there reaches a point where we have to have a discussion now. You can't beat a 15-year-old. I mean, you could, but really, it will make more sense to sit them down and show them what they are doing wrong and tell them, this is why. And also tell them about yourself. The other thing I lacked was the ability for someone to open up. And you'll notice that in my book, I have tried to be very candid, because I lacked that candidness myself in terms of, somebody telling me that these are the mistakes I made, this is how I got out of them, and it's okay. You do screw up in life, and you do bounce back from, the messes that you make. Now, in terms of the kiboko growing younger, well, it was necessary. There were points, of course, we were truants, and only a kiboko could correct those kind of things. But like I say, there's a shelf life. You can't kiboko everything out. So, you know, by the time I was 16, 17 years old, I already had fairly good driving skills, which, by the way, I want to attribute to my dad, because I think, and I want to say, he didn't set out to teach me. Here's what happened. We were stealing his car. Often, you know, most times those days, I think he had a lot of trips. So when he had a trip, so what we would do is we would, me and some friends of mine would go to the car and we would put charcoal marks beside the tire, yeah, so that tutarudisha pale. You know. It really helped our parking, by the way. There's very few parking spaces I cannot get into as a result of that. Sometimes, you know, those people will say, ati kuja boss. I'm like, sometimes they're like, boss, I got this. Washana tunayo. Anyway, so we would steal the car and then we would bring it back. And it wasn't overnight in the beginning. It was like on an afternoon that he's gone and we are all testing. In that testing, changing of gears, because those days it was only manual cars, was a major problem. So this one time we came up, and this was before now we moved to Eldoret. We came up the road on, I think it's called Bunyala Road, yes? You go up the hill, uko juu. It was not as wide as it is right now. It used to be like a 2-lane thing. So somewhere uko juu, the car choked. Now, because we did not know how to engage, 2-to-1 well, we were stuck. Only thing you could do is just kanyaga the brake. And the policeman came. In those days, policemen were really kind people. You know, utumishi kwa wote, that is a message. This policeman looked at us, 2 boys in the car, a car he doesn't know, asked us where we stayed from and drove us home. Handed us over to, then, there was an auntie in the house, so she was told about it. So later on, my dad came and found out. So when he found out about it, the strangest thing happened. For the first time since the history of Saddam, he didn't react the way he would normally have reacted. You know what he did? He took me to the car the following day and told me, so you can drive. Drive. And I began, stuttering. Your dad is there, so you cannot even move the vehicle. You're just starting it. It's just... But over time, he began to teach me what to do. And so by the time I was 15, I was driving. By the time I was 16, I was doing errands. By the time I was 17, I was doing even long distance, because by then we had some vehicles that were doing long distance, these Peugeots. The moment I was able to attain the age of 18 years, I got a license immediately. I began even driving lorries. So, tractors, you name them. As a result, I was one of the few young people in those days who was able to drive and drive well. Now, what happened was, word quickly went round, People see me driving my dad's pickup, doing errands, all that. So, Mzee so-and-so calls you. Hey, can you do this for me? Hey, can you do this for me? And that's okay, because at that moment in time, you're gaining experience. Yes, you're also wanting to be respectful to your elders. But unknowingly, you begin to lose your value. So people see you as an errand boy, but they never compensate you for the same. So what you get is, a plate of food, a pat on the back, 500 shillings, something that would never be, if they took a driver, they would never pay for. And as a result, because of it, and your own self, degradation in terms of unapeana heshima, you never ever quote. Then you take that with you into your 20s. You take it with you into your 30s. So you become Mr. Nice Guy who never knows how to quote right, because you're trying to please people. And that's what I really meant by knowing your value. Not because you cannot give, services for free, because sometimes I do that, even myself, even now. If somebody will call me and they'll ask me for a favor, and hey, why not? But beware, there's a thin line between too many favors and loss of value. And that happens a lot to young people. You have a good skill. You're a camera person. Unaitwa harusi, sijui functions, sijui nini. You're always shooting for people, but you're never paid for it. And then somebody comes who's a big-time photographer and they get a lot of money for it, because that person is aware of their value. Because once you carry that to your work environment, that's what happens. You end up in a place where, especially those of us who are in the media industry, where you're earning this X amount of pay, so-and-so is doing the same job as you, they're earning 4 times your figure. You can never negotiate. You never learned how to, so you can't, because you're happy to get the job. Everyone knows jobs are scarce in Kenya already. So now you keep on having excuses for yourself to press yourself down value-wise. And then you realize it hits you hard when you're 40. Hey, I never traded on my value. Maybe I could have done different. I have seen people. The other day I saw a social media influencer put up a price tag for herself, and people said, not too much. And I was thinking, that girl, she knows her value. And this is not a message to young people to go and be busy, charge people obscene amounts of money for services. But start somewhere. Charge something. Right, so after I finished high school, I didn't get the kind of marks that could take me to the university I had wanted personally, if I had been asked to study law. But I think no one really asked me, what do you want to be? And I don't think I really personally interrogated the question myself very, very hard. So there I was, I finished high school, and next thing I know, Saddam has brought me these application letters for KMTC. Not application really. He's brought me a letter telling me I've been accepted into KMTC. So there I am, admitted to KMTC Nairobi to do clinical medicine, to go and be a daktari. Even clinical medicine, wanasemaga daktari tayari. Or you're on the way there. And it's a very lucrative course, no doubt about it. And, at that moment in time, even more lucrative, because in that year, they were taking only 45 people or something like that. And the matter was not lost on me. It was said even in the prayer meetings as we are going, Father, he was among the 45 and all that. So, so I came back to Nairobi to go to KMTC. First lesson was anatomy, physiology. I hated it. I thought this is not the thing for me. I don't know. There are those things you just start and over here, I don't belong here. But I kept at it for a year. And for that 1 year, I didn't do badly, but in the second semester, I was done. So I think instead of me sitting down and telling my dad I could have done this or that or the other, I began just to be a truant in school. I started missing classes. At that moment in time, my mama had also moved to Eldoret, but we had kept a house in Nairobi, so I was using it, for to go to school and also for my own escapades, to throw parties in it and things like that. So, of course, the proverbial 40 days came. And the exams came out, and there I was. I had flunked, horrendously. And I was supposed to do a supplementaries and repeat the year. I refused to do that. And my dad's like, what do you want to do? And I'm thinking, shipping management. So off I went to do shipping management. 6 months in, not the thing for me. I jumped out of that one. I did another business management course. I jumped out of that one. So by the time I was going to the US, which was the year in early of 1999, my parents were just fed up with my stories. I was that guy who just did not know what I wanted to do. My sister had gone a year earlier, and she, my sister was more structured than myself. She got out of high school, she got into Baraton University, she started studying, got there 2 years in, she got a scholarship to a university in the US, and boom, she transitioned to go and do biochemistry. Serious things, And there I was, joker me doing all the manner of, hop, skip, and jump. So she sent a letter from there to me telling me apply for sports medicine in this university. So sports medicine, did I know what sports medicine was? There was no Google and no time to find out. But hey, sports medicine it is. So I applied. I got an I-20 from the University of Washburn in Kansas. And then I got an acceptance. Then it was time to go for the visa. So when I had the acceptance, I showed my mom. I told her, hey, I need a visa. Facilitate this thing. I don't think they believed I would get the visa, to be honest. In those days, the 1998 bombing had just happened, and the American embassy had moved to some makeshift structure up on Mombasa Road, somewhere. There were people being denied visas there, like there's no tomorrow. In fact, you used to go there, and there used to be this lady. She was like half American, half Chinese. Her job was just to say no. I think she was put there for that particular that particular story. That lady was telling guys no, and they're saying no, and they have a loudspeaker. So uko kwa counter uko tu naulizwa tu, so what are you going to study in America? I think she had an accent and like a Chinese one there also. Blah, 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 blah. No, come next year. So when it got my turn, I was, you are looking and you're thinking, there are at least 3 counters. The hope is that as people are moving and you can see your number is about to come up, you don't end up at the no counter. But that's where I ended up. I actually even ended up like, yeah, what will happen? So I ended up there. And she asked me, she told me, what are you going to study? I said, sports medicine. Do you know what it's about? I said, yes. What is it about? I said, it's medicine that is designed especially for athletes, ligaments, injuries, those kind of things. She says, okay, do you play any sports? Yes. What do you do? Swimming. What are your favorite strokes? I told her. She asked me, what strokes are there in swimming? First of all, I said there are 4 strokes. Backstroke, breaststroke, freestyle, and fly, or butterfly. What's your favorite? I said freestyle. Or crawl. It's called crawl as well. She's like, I see you even know the slang. I said, yeah, come for your visa too. Same day, come for your visa too. Those days, visa inapewana hapo. Hey, bro, I left that place, singing hallelujah. I mean, here I was going to America. Going to America at a squeezy. I see guys want to go to America now. And squeeze of America was America. Say at America, yeah, squeezy. We can see it on TV. It's not, you can find America in Runda here. That was America, you guys. So anyway, I went home with my passport with a visa stamped all the way to Eldoret, Of course, they called, a celebration, prayers were held. My former principal, the late Samiga Shingishi, is the one who came to pray for me. He was my principal at Kaptagat, and he was so happy. He was like, you go get him, Nini, what? And a fundraiser was held. Money was changwad. Although it was not, in those days, people never used to changa so much money. It was just enough money to buy the air ticket. They give you the air ticket, maybe you get the first semester, then you go. So you're going to the land of plenty. Tajipanga huko. And it was never a big deal. People used to know all you just need to do is just get that money and get out. Nowadays, I hear people putting a big story, they want 5 million shillings from who? You want us to pay for your 4 years, wacha mchezo. Enda ujipange. So, this was the first thing that I had done that had worked. You can imagine all the other things had not worked well. Here I was, I had left high school and everything else had failed. MTC had failed, KIM had failed, this shipping management school had failed, and here I was now, finally, with a visa in hand. Finally, I was a success, even to my peers. I was going to America. There was no beating that. But before I went to America, something happened. And we went for, my friend and I think he'll appreciate me naming him, Herbert. He's still my boy. Herbert and I went on a throwdown party for a farewell thing, really. We were in Nairobi, like the day before I left, and we went for a party, and I was taking concoctions. Those things they bring you, CG, pina colada with what, CG, you're trying all those things because you're about to fly out. And I got drunk. And it was in the afternoon, and I'm flying out in the evening. So I'm so drunk by 4 p.m. My flight is at 10 p.m. And we were, doing this farewell party at my auntie and uncle's house in Nairobi, in Apo Funguo Estate. So really, by the time I got home, everyone kind of knew. I mean, the smelling of the booze, the behavior. And my dad had put his foot down and said, it's not happening. But my uncle and my aunt prevailed upon him. Said, please, just let the guy go. So nikapewa maji, kunywa maji, poesha, nini. And by 9 o'clock, I was somewhat steady enough to be taken to the airport. So it was a very quiet ride to the airport, that's what I remember. Very shameful, of course, because here I was going to America, where people were just celebrating and all that. Here I was drunk, and leaving the same day. And that is how I left. With all that had been going on in the day, all I wanted to sleep. And I woke up only to the announcement that we were landing in Paris, France. And it was from there that the reality, now you're sobered up, the reality hit me. I really messed up on my leaving. And in my book, and that's why I say sometimes in life, the messes we do, the screw up is right at the beginning. Because with what happened in America, a bad start became a bad ending. Landing in America was already an experience. I landed during the snow. First of all, ni mambo ya snow, unaangalia, hey. I remember the cars looked all so new, coming from the airport. When you're here, you can see some very rickety vehicles, Things watu wameshikilia paka na makamba nini. Hakuna hiyo story. Hakuna moshi, sijui mbaya mbaya. Like, kweli, this is the place I needed to be. And of course, once that bubble wore off, and because I was landing in November and my schooling was in January, I spent a lot of time in the house. So initially, it's the excitement of watching all those soaps that you had. Because those days, the soaps we were watching in Kenya were behind by some years. The ones in the US, zilikuwa mbele mbele kidogo, the latest ones. So you're watching them, and then you're calling back home, and you're saying, hey, mnajua, you know what has happened to Ridge Forrester? Asha achana na huyo dem. Mnajua, you're spoiling for guys back home, and telling them, kunyuma sana, those kind of things. And also, I ran up quite some huge phone bills because I kept calling back. Talking to my friends. Those days I had a girlfriend in Kenya who I was calling a lot. And that got me into a lot of trouble with my sister because when the bills came, the monthly bills, it was really, I came from Sprint, and Sprint had had some crazy bills over there. I think it was $730 I ran up the first month. The apartment that we lived in had some cleaners who were white, and I could not just get enough of that. Saa zingine hata unasikia utupe tu takataka. Wachukue tu tena. Just just because, by the way. So anyway, those months went by in a blur. Of course, school started and reality hit home. Now I have to start learning and stuff. And I began learning. I also got a job. My first job I got was in a warehouse. And I was in that warehouse. I had to do a training to learn how to drive a forklift, which was a very lucrative position at that moment in time because forklift drivers were not so many. Thankfully, I had a bit of driving experience. But with forklift, it's a little bit different. The gearworks and the stuff and the fact that you have to put the pulleys up and down and make sure that you swing into tighter spaces and stack up things. But I got really good at it. So because I got really good at it, I got so many hours. As a result, I began to see now my own money. That money changed me. Earrings. I still have holes in my ears. Sometimes my daughters want to, the other day they were pushing something through here and it entered. And I was telling them, look, you guys, they're like, stay like that. I'm like, where? And I dreadlocks, I think God punished me with a bald head because of the way I did things to my hair. I had dreadlocks. Why? Nani who could not? I wanted to be like Ruud van Gullit. Remember Van Gullit was that guy for Netherlands who was to play for the Dutch team. Hey, you guy. Got a tattoo back there. Thankfully, it is not somewhere conspicuous. So, unless you really get to know me, you're never going to see that. But those are all rebellious acts. Now I'm not at home, my father is not here, what can he do? Those kind of things. So you're getting jobs. And I was always looking for a better job. So I really job hopped. And in the US, if you want to work, especially in those days, there were jobs. Jobs are plenty. So I did everything. I did that, for some time I did warehouse. Then I was like, apana. They started going into some sort of recession because there's some jobs that quit over summertime, then they pick up again. So they quit over winter, pick up at summertime. So I find myself doing telemarketing, didn't like it. I went and, washed trucks, didn't like it. I went and worked in a mint, I didn't like it. I've worked in a gas station. I've worked in an old people's home. I was taking these old guys, we used to go watch movies, you drive them back in the evening. So I was trying to do all manner of things, trying to find that particular job, that one that will kick. So eventually it did. I got a job with a Coca-Cola Mid-America company as first as a sales manager and then a territory sales manager. And that job was awesome. First it had a salary, which was not something that was usual. Usually you'd be paid every week. Salaried people were called the moneyed people because they would get money like every 2 weeks or every month, but it was hefty. This job was hefty. It came with a company van, an unlimited fuel, card, and then I used to clock in through the phone. I mean, I would wake up in the morning, and after they're done training, so I would wake up and then I'd say, this is in those days I was Levi, because I was. Unajua ukishafika ng'ambo, mambo inabadilika. Levi Conness becomes Levi Cones. So I was Levi Cones. So I'll be calling in the morning, 6:45 a.m. I'm like, this is Levi clocking in. You've clocked in by phone. Now your job is to get a van, go around all the like if it had stalls, like the way we have got some supermarkets, So you go to all those supermarkets to make sure that your brand is put in the right places, it's displayed well, the sales managers who are there are doing their jobs, if there is an issue with lack of whatever brand. And Coca-Cola has got a lot of brands, more brands than we've ever seen here. In fact, some of the things, Minute Maid is a Coca-Cola product. Yeah? And Coca-Cola has got some flavors that are not, especially in Fanta, that I've never seen in Kenya. So all these brands had to be set up, and you have to follow all of them. If there's an issue with a brand doing badly, you have to take notes about it. So that was my job during the day. But I clock out at 3 p.m. by phone. So really, after a while, I would clock in and not go. I'm clocking in, I'm in another state even. Now, because I've had money now, I'm tangatying this fuel card I'm using it. I'm even fueling my sister's car, I'm fueling your buddy's car, I'm doing all manner of things. And I was never busted with that particular issue. The only issue that came to the fore that became a problem was after a while, because in this particular time, my lifestyle of partying was way up there. And in your 20s, by the way, thank God for your 20s. In your 20s are those years where you can be in a club till morning today, and tomorrow you're at work. And the following day, you're clubbing. And the next day, you're at work. You're like the Energizer Bunny. I can't imagine that now. Nowadays, I sit even till 1 o'clock drinking tea. And I'm recovering for half the day the following day. This. In Africa, 9:30, you're like, you're getting older. You're planning things around your sleep. You're like, tutafika home saa 4, ndio tulale paka 4 o'clock. You're calculating hours of sleep. Who was doing that? And I'm telling you, young people, youth is bliss, my brothers and sisters. It's quishaing. Jifanyeni tu hapo. So, here I am doing that. Thursday night I'm in a reggae thing. Friday nights we are doing hip hop somewhere. Saturday night you're doing karaoke, and that lifestyle is continuing and continuing and continuing. And one day at my job, and I was pretty good at my job, honestly speaking. In fact, I was meeting all my targets, no issues. But the thing that was suffering was schoolwork. In fact, after my first big paycheck came from Coca-Cola, I just looked at it and then I thought, see, this is why we go to school. Si tuenda shule, ndo tupate do. Basi ndo ido. Sasa shule. I quit school in a half and a puff. I didn't say I quit. I just stopped going. The school looked for me. They kind of gave up on the story. In this day and time, you can't do that, by the way. You quit school today, even one semester, you're going to be back home on the weekend flights. Hakuna jokes. I think people like us really messed up for the guys who are there, Poleni. We messed up. I was there on what is called an F1 visa. It's a student visa. You're not even supposed to work so many hours. It's supposed to be 20 hours. But those days what would happen? You'd get in, then you get someone to make for you a social security card. They'd give you the number, but then the number would say not allowed to work. So somebody else would make you another card. They would remove that cabana says not allowed to work. So then with that one, anytime you present it, you look like an American citizen. And no one questions your citizenship at all. So you get jobs Americans would get, like this one at Coca-Cola. Until they had a change of management, I think, or something like that. And then they wanted to just review employee files. And they said, as you bring your paperwork, please bring proof of your American citizenship. And then that day I went, I was told at work by my boss, so I thought about it, and then I went home. I thought about it. I told my sister, this is what they want. They want the American citizenship. She just told me, hey, you're cooked. Now, you see, if I don't provide proof that I'm an American citizen, it means I've been working illegally. If I've been working illegally, that's a federal offense. That's jail time to begin with. It'll end up in deportation. So what did I do? I opted to resign. I had to resign. I had to resign from the job I really wanted, So I wrote a resignation letter and I moved out of state. Went to live with a friend. The friend I called, I told him, okay, I'm coming. And he lived in Atlanta at that time, and packed my bags, put them in the car, told my sister, adios, going to start a new life. And that's how I found myself leaving the backward state of Kansas for Atlanta, Georgia. You know, which was really fast-paced and really different from what I'd been used to, and full of blacks, as opposed to this predominantly very shags modest town had been. So if Kansas was fast in terms of getting jobs, then Atlanta was really the place to be. Although the costing of living was very high. You know, getting an apartment was much more expensive than Kansas. So I was living with these two friends. One of them was from back home in Eldoret. She gratefully, you know, is the one who actually hooked me up. The other guy, I met him there, Kenyan, who had been there for many years, is still there. And the two of them are also quite, you know, the party animals. So for some time as I was looking for a job, you know how it is ukikaa na watu, unatafuta job, but the more you're not getting a job, the more mnaenda kugwaruzana. So it reached a point I had to move out. But as I was moving out, I got a job with a gas station, which was not a big job. You know, ile job you're in a petrol station, you're the guy at night who is, you know, tallying for people things and stuff like that. So I worked there for 2 weeks, and I was earning like a fraction of what I used to earn. So even the house I got was in a dingy part of Atlanta. But then something happened. Some guys came and gave me an idea. They were like, hey, gas station unafanya kazi hapa. You know how Kenyans are. Si uchanuke boss. Uza pombe zako. So I began buying now from a supermarket, put in the gas station. I sell my own beer instead of the and I made a lot of money. It actually financed my lifestyle for a while. And that situation at Atlanta did not last long. I talk about it quite at length, you know, in the book. And I talk about the aspect that, you know, I got into a relationship at that point in time also that didn't also go very well. And then I ended up in Chicago. And in Chicago, I moved there predominantly because there were some two ladies who were moving out of Atlanta to Chicago. They, you know, we had met each other in the social circles. They're like, oh, so we can move in together. Those sides, let's look for a house. I'm like, I'm game. I mean, I'm that guy who's just going, you know. And this is like 4 years into my American stay. So we moved into Chicago. I got a job with Motorola company. For a while, it was okay. And I also got another job with the Chicago Tribune. It was my first dalliance with the media, because I used to write a few articles for them on, you know, and also sell newspapers to people over the phone. And that worked out well for some time. And then the Motorola company in that particular area shut down. They moved their plant somewhere else. So there we were, jobless again. It was at this point that, like the prodigal son, I began thinking, maybe I should go back to Kansas. And I began talking with my sister. Said, you know, maybe I should come back there. Maybe we should restart this thing and look at it a little bit differently. You know, because the partying lifestyle had not ideated me much. And things had not worked out so well. So you can imagine in your 20s, you earn a bit of money like me. I bought a BMW that was not even I mean, that car costed me so much in terms of parts. It was not even worth it. But I did it because I always wanted to own one. You know, and there I was living in a condo in Chicago eventually before I got out. But I was on the 23rd floor, overlooking the whole city, paying $1,700 for it per week because of lifestyle. I think, by the way, if we go and look at my kuna omera something huko ndani somewhere. Maybe it's the coffee. You know, some guys think I'm from the lakeside, but there is like a something, man. My wife keeps on telling me, wewe, ungekuwa wewe. I'm like, because she says I'm a spendthrift, so I'm trying. You know, when you talk about pressure from back home, one of the things I thank God for was that social media had not taken off the way it has now. You know, we would write a letter home, then it would arrive after 3 weeks. Then they write a letter back to you, then it's after 3 weeks. If you really want it to get quickly, you've got to FedEx it or to, you know, DHL it. And you'd send your own pictures, you know. We would send pictures, the ones we've selected. Imagine if social media was there. Imagine it would be double the expectation in trying to prove things. Because even then, we were sending pictures of our cars. hey, I bought this car, this is where we live, this is what, and you're selling it to your bros. So my brother wanaonyesha kijiji yote inajua, kuna brother ya our same as he's doing things in the States. And that of course is a thing that is also driving you, the aspect of you're not home, you really want to prove a fact. But then there was also the thing of proving Kenyans to Kenyans right there. And they have it quite a bit. I mean, guys will go and rent vehicles and come to a party and try to show off and pull it off as it's a new car for themselves. Because, unlike here, you can rent a pretty brand car and show up with it. And you can make it look like yours. So umetoa hiyo makaratasi yote ya insurance. And some of those cars are not even branded. The only thing that will tell you it's an insurance car is if you open the dashboard and looked at the insurance. But even if the guy removed it there, you'll never know. Just tell you, I bought this car, I'm doing well, and the guy is going back to a shanty somewhere in some state. And there's always that thing we're always trying to prove. In fact, I remember one time I had to tell another friend of mine, Maze tuko ngambo wote. Kuna ule msee anaringa mpaka unamwambia boss, tuko ngambo. We're both here, there's look around you, this is America. My goodness, I can't believe, you've asked, have I been able to do something tangible for myself? Good Lord, nothing. One of the greatest regrets of life is the misuse of the 20s because the energy is abounding. The ability is there. The opportunities are so many. Yet when you do not do anything with your life, it catches up with you. It really does. It doesn't matter how much, sometimes I might write a book and look like, so I've learned my lessons and I have, started doing something. But you know what? I am 20 years late. What I can only do now is play catch up. But I can't get it back. There's an effect that is long lasting, that is ungainable. Let no one cheat you at sijui inarudi 50 times 50. No, not that easily. They still, the consequences. The Bible tells us what? That the wages of sin is death. There's a cost for the things you're doing. And that cost has to be met. It's either met by your inability to function the way you would have functioned. Like I tell you now, I'm no longer 20. If you call me right now and tell me, we are going to do something till 4 a.m., I'll have to structure it. There's a cost. I can no longer do that and tell myself at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Recently, I was busy I went to Nakuru, came back, went to Mombasa, came back, and then I was sick for 3 days. Now, you tell... and it's not sickness that's tangible. Unajua unaenda kwa daktari anakupima like, you know what? End of pumziki. Now you're fatigued. Now, imagine those are rich people problems. What is that? So there's a cost to these things. So did I do anything? No, I didn't do anything. And that is how I ended up at a point where when the American journey was coming to an end, it was a very heavy journey for me because I landed back here with nothing. Okay, so the events that led to me coming back. Tutaanza story wapi? That is a very bad story. Can I just read from the book? Because I feel sometimes, sometimes I want to tell myself, did that really happen to me? And you kind of said it's like a movie. At that point in time, it doesn't sound like it's a movie. It's a reality, only that when you look back, you're like, wow, really, God, wow. So anyway, this thing started with me wanting to go back to Kansas. One of the greatest regrets of life is the misuse of the 20s because the energy is abounding. The ability is there. The opportunities are so many. Yet when you do not do anything with your life, it catches up with you know. And there I was, living in a condo in Chicago eventually before I got out. But I was on the 23rd floor, overlooking the whole city, paying $1,700 for it per week because of lifestyle. I ended up at a point where when the American journey was coming to an end, it was a very heavy journey for me because I landed back here with nothing. Okay, so the events that led to me coming back. Ooh, I turn the story up. That is a very bad story. You know, can I just read from the book? Because I feel sometimes, sometimes I want to tell myself, did that really happen to me? And you kind of said it's like a movie. At that point in time, it doesn't sound like it's a movie. It's a reality, only that when you look back, you're like, wow, really, God, wow. So anyway, this thing started with me wanting to go back to Kansas and calling my sister and telling her I want to come back home. And at that time, I had this on-again, off-again girlfriend who lived in a place called Winona in Minnesota. So, which is about maybe 4 hours away from Chicago, I think 4 or 5 hours or something like that. So in terms of mapping, if Chicago is here, you go up here to Winona, then you come down that way to Kansas. So I thought I'll go visit her first, have a good time, come through Iowa, see if I can see another one, and then go to Kansas. So that was the plan. So I packed up all my stuff as usual, threw them in the car, and I set off. It was in the afternoon when I set off. So I arrived in Winona in the evening, and we went out. And I do remember that when we came back, we had an argument. You know, those times when I was doing a lot of bad checks, I used to write bad checks and stuff, and she caught me. And we had an argument about it, and I threw my hands up in the air, and I told her, by the way, you know what, I don't have to be in your house, I don't have to sleep here. And to her credit, really, she really tried to get me to stay. But I wasn't having it. So 2 a.m. in the morning found me driving off, and by this time, of course, I was boozing when I left Chicago. I'm boozing when I got to Winona. We've been out, so I was drinking. So now, all this drinking, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I am exhausted. Now, you know what happens when you're driving in the colder winter time, you put heat. So I'm beginning to get sleepy, and I'm thinking I have to find somewhere to sleep. I had an incident in Atlanta where I slept and had a car crash, maybe 2 or so years back. So I knew the fallacy of pretending that I was going to do well with the heater and, myself alone in the car. So I pulled up to a motel called the American Inn. In fact, I just saw it, and I even made a U-turn to go to it because I passed it fast. It was written $34.99 a night, which I thought was very fair at that moment in time. I went there, checked in. For some reason, I could not find my driver's license. Usually, you'd use your license to book, then you write a check, and then then that's the end of the story. Now, this license I was using was not there. So the only thing available was my passport. But my passport had expired the year before. So the guy saw the passport, he took it, he gave me a room. So apparently he studied the passport and saw the expiry. And in those days, it was shortly after, just was at the stage, it was shortly after the 9/11 time. And the issue there at that moment in time is, people are suspicious of each other and suspicious especially of foreigners. So this guy just called the immigration. There's a guy here with an expired passport. And that's how the chain of events of how I came back home. So, unbeknown to me, those guys, of course, they went into my records, they looked, this guy came to America, he has not been in school, ametangatanga, huko Chicago, huko what, he's even driving a car, he's got all his belongings, all the things that can tick off terrorists, And so they showed up to the motel in the morning at 6 a.m. I, of course, have gone to Lala, and I have Lala, the good one, a deep one. I'm not hearing anything. I was woken up by the door being broken in. I hear they had tried to call me on those matarumetas of theirs or things. I hear they tried to say, you open the door or something. I had not had it, in all honesty. In fact, I think they thought that I was preparing for a counterattack, yes. So they busted in through the door. may just remember being pulled out from my bed, being sat on the bed and being cuffed. I really thank God that when they broke the door, I didn't took her up out of bed, because I think the way they came in all guns drawn, they would have shot me and killed me. And you know, we are in a place called Euclid. It is not it's Euclid is another part of Minnesota, which is also rural. You know, given the whole thing you see with black shootings and stuff like that, who knows what would have happened? So I was arrested like that. I was taken to the, to the station. The thing they were telling me at that moment in time was, you wrote a bad check. But I didn't write a bad check because I had money in that account. I told them that's not a bad check. So we argue back and forth, and then they tell me, okay, you'll spend the night, we'll see about it in the morning, and there I am overnight. And then the following morning, I'm pulled out of the cells, and the guys I meet are for immigration. And then I just knew, bus. And you know those days we used to fear, they say fear, after God, fear the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Services. Hey, they're called services, but there's no service really. They threw me in a van. This van, you know, only the back they carry you in, and they chain you both hands and legs. And took me to now the twin cities of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where they used to have a huge, or they still do, I think, a huge headquarters for the immigration, department in America. So I was taken there. I was booked in, given a, interview, and of course me by that time. Everything has fallen on me, Annie. My whole demeanor is just dropped because I've just realized my American journey is over, really. And all the messes I've done in America have come down so heavily on me. So I told them, I confessed, yeah, it's true. I went to school, yeah, me. That DUI, that's me. A bad check here, I wrote, yeah, that's me. Coca-Cola Mid-America, you got a job there, you had no, yeah, that's me. One of the things the American system really values is honesty. When you're caught, don't just chase our games. Just say what it is. So the guy told me, okay, now what we're going to do for you is we'll find a way to take you back home. Do you have any contests? By that time, of course, my parents are aware because I was given that one phone call. I called my sister. I told her. I was speaking to her in Kiswahili, sheng, you're trying to confuse them. Because sometimes they go also after the family member. Just tell them, me, I just want to go back home. I don't want to contest. Because the guys who are contesting cases there, the guys contesting cases 10, 15 years. Utashinda jela. 10, 15 years. Then you come out, then what? And you have a tag of now, a jailbird. I was thinking about it. I'm like, let me just go home. At that moment in time, you're just thinking, let me just go home. And my father was running for an election, which he had also failed, but he had also started a business. So I didn't think that things would be so bad when I got home. But how wrong I was, the bubble in my mind at that moment in time, because I hadn't been home for almost 6 years. So I was then taken to a prison in Rush City. Rush City is in Minneapolis, not about 2 hours away from Minneapolis. And then I was checked in and I was booked in and I started prison life there. And for the next 6 weeks, I was in solitary confinement, coming out for, a bit of games, sunlight here and there, but basically mostly alone. I used to play those games, start, stop, name, country, car, animal, G, what, nini. Then you do A, you run it in your mind, B. Did you ever play those games? I think you never played those games. Those are games for older people. Young people, you cannot get those ones. You cannot coach those ones. And trying to stay sane. There was another one for XO. You do some ninis, you do XO, then you play. And then you get the Gideon's Bible. So I read the Bible from cover to cover for the first time in my life. Some experiences are good for things like that. And after 6 weeks, the doors were opened and I was told, you're going home today. So I was taken to the Minneapolis airport. I was put on a KLM flight. Later on, I found out, by the way, they removed the cuffs and put me on the flight. Usually they accompany someone with cuffs all the way to Kenya. And I hear that's not good when you get here, So thank God for mothers, My mom talked to a friend of hers who used to work in the immigration department, who really beseeched them not to do that. And because I had also told them that I was okay with going home and stuff, they didn't. So they took off my cuffs. They gave me my ticket. They told me I'll be met by some policemen in Amsterdam for the transfer. And, I can sit there in the lounges, do whatever I want to do, but make sure that I leave. Their job was to make sure I leave, catch my connecting flight. And that was it. So in the plane, I was alone. So me, shorts, a t-shirt, a kabuti, a kofia. Maybe that's why I like kofias. So that's how I landed at JKIA with nothing. It's amazing. Now I can look at it. Every time I look around my house and I see things like, couches and, I'm like, man, God is interesting. I landed with nothing. The only thing I had was my wallet, and my wallet had cards which then were not working in Kenya. And I had about, I think it was some few dollars which I used in Amsterdam. But I drank all the way. Flights, pombe ya flights, ilinitambua. Nilichapa kuichapa. But I didn't get drunk. There are moments, your stress levels, even if you try drugs, I work. So here I landed. I was, of course, heavier. Here I was heavyweight, about 120 kilos. And now we get off the plane, we are going to the car, and then we get to the car, and my dad says, my mom says that utaka mbele, then my dad is like, let him sit in the back, that's where he can fit. And, and I say, just like that, the joke started for the next season of my life. So I went home to Eldoret, and I can tell you for the next, I think 4 or 5 years, I battled demons inside me that I never knew existed. Mostly the demons of failure. Demons of not being able to, having come home with nothing. I mean, people said all manner of things about me. I was trending, sort of, you can call it, it's just the trends were not there. I think Facebook was just about to take off. But, I was trending in the neighborhood. Every time I talked to somebody, especially women, girls, the parents would call, that guy, someone was deported. It was a terrible time for me. I went to church and got a lot of condemnation from the church. As a result, I got into alcoholism. And by the time and then I got a job with an NGO. But even when I got a job in the NGO, things didn't work out right so much there because it was an NGO with some Americans, and they also gave me a difficult time at some points because I dated one of the Wazungus there. And I also got a job with a radio station, but that radio station was not paying me money at some point. I moved to another TV station, it wasn't paying me money. One of the worst things about our Christian faith is we have a lot of Christians who are willing to misuse talent for no cost. Too many. You get a guy, he's working for a pastor or a ministry or a church or, something, and you guys don't pay. I mean, what's up with that? What's up with that, really? It's one of the worst demoralizing things you can ever do to someone, because most of those people who come to a ministry, they are giving to God and they're giving 110%. And then you discover you're just being fronted. Because usually they'll tell you, sign here, contract, nini, what, and then you wonder, why are we not espousing the principles of Christ? Mahatma Gandhi said, I love their Christ, but I hate their Christian. Famously. We are actually shaming Christ himself. Anyway, I've digressed. The point I was trying to make is this. I suffered a lot in that time. So by the time I ended up in a rehab, I was done. I was at rock bottom. There was nothing else for me. I was overweight, I was drinking, things were not working. And I had seen a friend go to rehab and really reform, and I really wanted to be like that. So it was something I was grasping. You're grasping at straws because you're this failure who has done so many of these things. So the rehab was a special time for me because it was one of the first places where I ever finished something I started. 3 months in, and I went out 3 months out. I even got a certificate. I put it very proudly. It's one of my first certificates before any others that signified not just a change in my life, because it wasn't just about the drinking, because I came to realize one thing. By the time we get into a place where we're taking drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, it's a soul that's so wounded when you're abusing it. It's not so much, we put too much pressure on the act of the alcoholism or the drug abuse. But we forget that there's a wounded soul behind all that. We have to find out. If we don't fix that, then we can't fix these others. That's why in moments of depression, we find people who don't normally drink falling back because they were depressed, falling back because a traumatic event happening to them, falling back because somebody hurt them, falling back because somebody left them or somebody died. But we are over-focused on stop drinking. Why can't you just stop? And we are not helpful to each other when we do that. And we need to really change that perspective, because that is the byproduct. The issue is something else. The byproduct is the drugs and alcohol. For me, that was a learning curve. It wasn't because this rehab was so special. By the way, it was in Eldoret, and it was a very, very, how do I put it? It was a very humbling place. We were taking water from the well. There was no power, and in the first day I ran away. In fact, the day one, I checked in out. I was like, I can't stand this place. I can't be here. But I went, thought about it overnight, and I came back. And when I came back, I stayed. And that staying has always changed my perspective about life, because even though it does not mean that I became completely, how do I put it, free of my issues. Because later on in my book, I talk about how I went to Mombasa when I was having cancer and I got drunk and wanted to die. It never really, it wasn't a patch, but it has always been a reference point in getting back to the light. I look back and I tell myself, remember what you learned there. Not in terms of, when I'm talking about learning, not in terms of somebody coming and reading for you, and telling you learn this lesson here, but in terms of you assessing your experiences and seeing what you can learn from them and how you can change them. Of course, with the aid of tools around you, counselors, people, friends, family, that kind of thing. But really coming to a meeting with yourself and having a discussion with yourself and lining up yourself for something else. So that was what happened in terms of my life at that point. That's how I began to slowly creep back. So what inspired me to put this in a book? Oh my. I read some books of some gentlemen, I'll not name them, but gentlemen I found quite intriguing. One is, both of them, gurus in their fields. They wrote, I'd say, biographies about themselves. And I read their biographies, and to be honest, what they wrote and what I knew, especially about certain events that had happened in their life, they sugar-coated themselves. One of them was fired for a job, and I know why he was fired for a job, because I was privy to that story at that moment, but he didn't want to say that. So he scattered around it, And I thought, that book is not helpful to me, because I said the helpfulness of a book, in my opinion, is in not only learning something, but learning something through mistakes. Why? Because a lot of us have got similar mistakes. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people have walked up to me and told me, your book touched me because of A, B, C, D. And it's interesting, everyone takes a different chapter. I mean, I've wrote here about social media and what happened to me in social media, the way I was trolled, I've wrote here about, how I proposed to my girlfriend on TV and how that led up to that and what happened after that, because I got into another mess with, a psycho lady who put me all over the place on Gafla, wapi. I've wrote here about, my attitude towards money and, how you can solve your problems by making money. And those chapters have resonated differently. There's some guys who have resonated with the deportation story, and it's been good for them because, they've either, somebody has said, let me buy this book for somebody who's going abroad, or for somebody who is abroad, or for somebody who came back. Because, by the way, that's a whole other ministry in itself. We have got a lot of people who have been deported. At some point in time, the American Embassy was reporting 500 people per month, Kenyans, coming back. That's a huge number, of people coming back home. One of the people who bought my book told me a story. I took her book and she told me, hey, I was deported and I was jailed. And I told her, you have to tell your story one day. Because I told her that story of yours. She was jailed for 10 years in a US prison. I mean, you have people who have got deep, deep stories, but they have kept them. So they resonate with something you're saying, but you have to tell them the rawness of it for them to get to do that. So that was step one. Then when I was writing it, and some of the stories I wrote, like I wrote a story about my sister, and it became difficult for me to continue. Because, in writing, yes, surprisingly, when you write something, you relive it. Especially when you want to put detail into it, it comes back. And that part and about another part about a daughter I lost were heavy for me. Because they are big regrets. And I wish I could do better. I wish I could take back. For a long time, I never told anyone I had a daughter. Anyway, I was going to say that some of the reasons why you write these books is because in my struggle to see what I was going to say in terms of whether it would help someone or not, I wanted to ask myself, would it help me? If I was reading it, would I feel it? Would I like it? Or is it something I would recommend to someone else? And when I satisfied that question, I wrote the book. But then I had a big struggle about going to print. I really laid myself bare. One of my bosses told me, hey, ulijianika. I said, did I want to say all that? What would some of my family members think? I tried to avoid talking about my family so much because these were my stories, my experiences, I don't want to put their struggles into it so somebody can say, hey, although I had to touch on like my old man because he was such a factor in many of the things that happened to me. So going to print took 6 months in the struggle for, can I go to print with this, When I sent it to one editor and she looked at it, she's like, we have to print this book. If we do not print this book, I will kill you myself. And then I sent it to 6 other people. People have acknowledged behind here. Some of these guys that I have talked about who I said, I gave them the first draft, These guys I put in my acknowledgement. These are the first guys who told me, by the way, all of them had come back with the same, they would come back with, editorial, maybe grammatical changes here and there. But the storyline, they're like, boss, you have to tell this story. You have to write this story. You've got to put this in the book. And so I overcame my fear. And that's what I did. And that's how it has come out. When you say what resonated with you was the one about discipline, curb your appetites and master your body. Oh, that's a big one for me. You see, it's interesting that, like you say, people resonate with different things. And some people resonate, of course, with, knowing your value or, make money or, social media as a double-edged sword, which is some of the chapters in my book. And then there are people who resonate with the discipline in terms of food. If you look at me right now, I'm not a small guy. But in the last 1 month and 1 week, I've lost 7 kilos. And that chapter, along with the chapter where I said, that there are some things you have to do twice, in life. There are some things you will have to do twice to succeed. Or thrice or more times. But, you dig in, you do it again. Some years ago, I was on a weight loss show, Slim Possible. Many of you saw me on that show. I lost 36 kilos. Lost 4 more even off the show. Enjoyed myself. And this was now getting back the body that I had when I was a teenager. I mean, I was athletic, I swam, I played different kinds of sports. I never really, suffered from weights, really. And then, suddenly, after going to America, in America, man, things just happen. You start bulging at the seams. And initially, people tell you, I do remember I had a friend called Bonnie who used to tell me, you're getting love handles. And then it became worse. And then suddenly there I was. Then I get back to Kenya, and then I'm going through all the trauma that I'm going through. Internally, I'm now indisciplined food-wise. I'm also indisciplined with alcohol and drugs. I can only get bigger. So by the time I was going to that show, I had just been done with rehab. It had happened. I'd been done with rehab. I think it was about a year, not a year. Maybe it was about 7 or so months after. And I thought, I changed the story about drinking. Let me change the story about my body. So it kind of fell in step with what I wanted in my life. And on the show, it was very easy to lose weight in terms of, you're with other big people like you. You're exercising every day for 4 or 5 hours a day. Because you go in the morning, you go to that gym, and you're in the gym early, you exercise. Some people swim after that. Some guys say they're even walking after that. It was not, unlike what people used to imagine, it was not a boarding school. We were still living in our homes in Nairobi and coming back. But there's a lot of time given to it, to the point that you cannot really do a lot of anything else. And also because you're in a competitive spirit, you will lose weight. Those factors don't apply when you are alone. You can go to the gym solo and be there a whole month and lose half a kg. Or even sometimes you gain 1 and you're like, what, this thing is not for me. So losing weight in that, like that was easy. Then came the aspect where now you have to live the lifestyle alone. And for some years, that was okay with me. No problem at all. I gained a bit of weight, then I got cancer, which I've spoken about in my book quite extensively. And when I got cancer and I went through the chemos and I went through, the requirements in terms of like the procedures and stuff, I lost a lot of weight. And then after cancer, post-chemo, about a year or so later, I began to gain weight. Initially, my doctor was like, excellent, gain some weight. You need to be cooling, nini, what? And then it started going and it's going. And it's not actually uncommon for cancer patients sometimes. There are some we sit in many different fora, and there are a lot of guys who gained a lot of weight after chemo, after they were done and stuff. So suddenly, I'm 10 kilos overweight, I'm 20 kilos overweight, I'm back to where I used to be. So it's horrifying. But in studying with myself and in trying to, walk the path now backwards, one of the things I have discovered, and I wrote that in my book, is that aspect of self-discipline. You see, most of the problems weighty people are having, except with a few exceptions because of maybe biological issues and stuff like that, has to do with food. It's not so much exercise. Exercise is good for us to stretch our bones and do our ligaments, but it's really, some people say 20%, I say 10. Really, 90% is really what we eat and how we eat and when we eat. And one of the biggest problems is trying to get yourself to the point of self-discipline. That's difficult, And how do you really test that? When you're in a situation where you have gone for a party somewhere, and the food is on the house, the drinks are on the house, and tomorrow you're not working, how much are you going to eat? Where will your self-discipline kick in? And your wife is not there to tell you, you've wake up 3 samos. You're eating too much. There's no one, policing you. When no one is policing you, how can you police yourself? How much do you police yourself, or do you let it go? Because kuna this word we like using, tunapigia mwili pole, ama tunapiga sherehe. Their songs furaha ni kuwa na marafiki. So those things are all designed to make us think that it's okay to do that. So the self-discipline aspect is an aspect, and I said this is something I'm still working on myself. Hey, I'm not talking as an expert here. I mean, look at me, I'm trying in terms of self-discipline, but I realize it's a muscle. If we keep working at it, we only strengthen it. The same way, if we work at the indiscipline muscle, we also strengthen it. So I think the only thing you can start is really starting there. And then the funny thing is this: the more disciplined you get, the more powerful you feel. If you're in a room and you guys are having alcohol and you say, no, I don't drink, there is a power to it. They even feel it. Even the other guys are like, really? You don't drink? Really? Hata moja tu, hata sip, sijui nini. Then they admire resolve. First they challenge it, then they admire it. And that's always this whole thing. They'll always challenge it first. The same way your body will do to yourself. Am I really going to watch out those chapels? Really? Really? And the way they're looking nice and succulent. First it will challenge you. And then it will become a moment of glory. You know, I was there and I didn't do that. I was there and I didn't do that. And then that way you build yourself. And let's be honest, you think better when you're a little bit more hungry. Something about a lack of food and a sharpness on the brain. Too much food is also on the Achilles. So on that book, it's at chapter 6 of my book, I am trying to leave out that chapter myself. Give me till the end of the year. Then I can come back and speak now expertly. You know, I can be now, those of you that are joking with your weights, turn with me to my book, Yeah, to be honest, when you talk about the self-discipline of bouncing back, it's key. I have had friends, 2 friends, who came back in similar circumstances like myself, who are not above ground today. I mean, they came back and they crashed completely. And one of them could not just reconcile himself with the fact that he was not in the US anymore. And it became the goal to try and get back to the US. And when it never really happened, he just fell into a deep, deep pit of depression, and we were unable to get him out of it. What keeps me going, I think, that basic principle, for me, for some people may not say faith is a factor. For me, it's a big factor. Like I told you, I grew up in a Christian home, and the Bible was preached every day. And although I was resilient to it, it did fall into my ears, which is what I want to tell parents. Keep hope alive. The kids are listening even when you think they're not listening. And that gave me a healthy fear of hell and the devil, which led me to the point where I was not able to commit suicide because I knew where I was going if I did that. And I think sometimes, I wanted to do it, and sometimes I wanted to get drunk enough to do it, get the courage to be able to do it. But still, I had the internal, thing like, hey, this is not where you want to go. That's not what you want to do. The Bible says, train the child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they're not going to depart from it. And that's a very, very key aspect in terms of what held me together. Internally, I think. Also, the will to live. One of my chapters says, you can always begin again as long as you're still breathing. If you haven't gone and you're listening and you're watching and you're still here, your heart is beating. Doop, 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 doop. It doesn't matter if your hands are not moving, you can always start again. There's a reason why you're above ground. There's a reason why. There's got to be. We can't just have come here so we can make mistakes and, die and get buried. I mean, what is that? Well, it has to be that we have to make mistakes and bounce back. I mean, why is that whole graph of life, and the one for death is just flat? There's a reason why. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. And that's what's happening to our lives every day. So we haven't conquered, and we may never conquer until the day we go up yonder. But every time we are down, we remind ourselves, we are down because we can go up. And when we are up, it's possible to come down. But it does not mean that we stay down there for long. If you notice even that heartbeat thing, when it's down here, it's not actually down then up. It's always like choop, then up, So the same thing applies. So you have to speak to yourself, and the first person who can ever encourage you, you can buy motivational speakings and go to churches and, see whoever you see and watch whatever you want to watch, but no one will ever encourage you the way you will yourself. Has to start with you, self, telling you, hey, we can do this again. We can do this again. And I really thank God for the gift of family in terms of the people that surround me and friendship, because I also had friends there's some friends who never abandoned me. Okay, there are those ones who ran for the hills, but there are friends who spoke positive words, and and they were there and they did things, and eventually when I have managed to get a family of my own, I have been blessed with a wife who is able to, although sometimes she can be very curly with her words in terms of telling me the ukweli of the matter, but she's a very loyal person. And those things are very helpful in terms of someone speaking into your life. So right now the book, I'm a budding writer, so the book is not in bookshops. You won't go find it in Uko or where. I think the best thing, just reach me. Yeah? 0722 470 238. Send me a text, preferably during the daytime. Don't cause me problems in my house. And we can talk about how you can get the book.